my name is Sakina Barting. Welcome to another Paradise podcast. I'm joined here by Nicole Hayes, and today we will be discussing a little bit about the history of the Paralympics, where it all started off. We will also be talking about new sports possibly joining the Paralympics and how funding can help implement these new sports. So Nicole, tell us, what do you think should be added in terms of sports to the Paralympics?
What a great question. Well, obviously there's currently 28 sports, in the Paralympics, with the introduction of new para sports, including canoeing and the triathlon to the 2016 Rio Paralympics, which is brilliant to see. And, the introduction of badminton into the Tokyo Paralympics as well, which is really good. We're getting more sports involved. I'd like to see more track events. You have your standard 100 metres, 200 metres, but I feel like with the new and improved equipment, we could definitely expand more on track events for Paralympics. And also, I feel like wheelchair netball, we have wheelchair basketball, wheelchair rugby, which is predominantly male sports. Obviously not all, but I feel like netball is such a dominated female sport. It'd be brilliant to get wheelchair netball into the Paralympics as well.
You spoke a little bit about bringing in these new sports, of course, but especially when it comes to female netball, because we know that's dominated by females. How do you think participation can have an involvement in this?
Yeah, participation is a massive factor in the para sports. It's obviously dominated by males, with over 70% of the Paralympic participation being men. So I feel like with more funding and more advertisement, more women can definitely get involved. But obviously research has shown that over 40% of disabled people in the UK do not participate in sport. That could be due to loads of things: the lack of funding, the lack of equipment, and I feel like the lack of advertisement as well. There isn't a lot of Paralympic clubs. For wheelchair basketball, you need certain equipment to be able to participate. And if these clubs don't have the funding for said equipment, it's very, very difficult to get the numbers to be able to participate in this sport. And I feel like there's such a lack of role models in the Paralympics. It's not wanting the younger generation to be able to get involved in the sport as much. So I feel like with more funding, more equipment, more advertising, more role models in the sport, it will definitely increase the participation of female Paralympics.
That's really good, actually, the point you made there, which leads us into the funding that should be put into the Paralympics. When you look at the Olympics, they get much more funding compared to the Paralympics. I feel like Paralympics, if they did get the same amount of funding, like you said, there would be much more participants in the Paralympics. What do you think about that then?
Yeah, 100%. I feel like the Olympics is obviously a major world event. It's a global event. Everyone participates, and gets involved one way or another, supporting their countries. And I feel like the Paralympics is just kind of shone upon. There isn't as many sports, there isn't as many athletes, there's not enough funding into the Paralympics, so it just hasn't got as much spectatorship. Obviously, that's due to television rights being more in favour of the Olympics, so less people can know about the Paralympic sports. But the Olympics received a funding averagely of about 260 million, which is compared to only 71 million of the para sports. So you can see the difference of funding that the Paralympics gets compared to the Olympics. And I feel like with this lack of funding, we're not going to be able to provide the equipment and all the stuff required for para sports to be able to take place. And I feel like with more funding, we're definitely seeing an increase in participation in para sports. There's loads of different sponsorships such as Toyota and Coca-Cola, who have been doing a parasport campaign in 2019 to be able to get more funding for the parasports. But I feel like this definitely needs to increase to be able to increase the amount of participation in parasports.
You made a point there how we have big brands like Toyota sponsoring and putting funding into the Paralympics. What other brands do you have in mind, do you think could make a big impact in the funding for the Paralympics?
I feel like you need brands with global audiences. There's no good having a brand that is just designated to the UK, because that's not going to impact the Paralympians in other countries. You need big companies like Samsung, Intel, who have already, implemented funding into the Paralympic Games, which is, obviously really, really good. And throughout these partnerships, the International Paralympic Committee can expand on, athlete involvement and help launch education programs and help, grow the awareness of the Paralympic movement, which will just be very, very good, for the movement itself, and definitely get more people to participate in sport. Because as you see in Rio 2016, the British Olympic team took 366 athletes, while the Paralympic team only took 264. So that's a big decrease from the Olympic team. And I feel like with these fundings and with these sponsorships, there can definitely be a lot more advertisement and involvement for Paralympic athletes in the sport.
Okay, and just for a last topic, I mentioned we will be discussing a little bit about the history. What type of impact do you think the history will have on the future of Paralympics?
The history of the Paralympics will obviously have such a massive impact on the future generations. The future is made on past role models, past leaderships, and the Paralympics hasn't been going on for as long as the Olympics. The first modern Olympics was in 1896, created by Baron Pierre de Coubertin. He wanted to inspire and bring, the world together. The Paralympics wasn't invented until I think the mid-1920s, mid-1930s, which was obviously a few decades later. So it's got a little bit less history than the Olympics. And with the Olympics happening every 4 years compared to the Paralympics, it was every 10 years because it didn't have that much advertisement. Obviously, the lack of history is going to impact the Paralympics today. But I feel like with more advertisement, with more sponsorship and more funding, we can really, really definitely help develop the role models of the future.
Perfect. Thank you, Nicole, for joining us. Thank you for listening to another one of our Paradise podcasts. See you soon.